All right. Hello, hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right. Going to give everybody a minute to get in and logged in, and then we'll begin. All right, all right. So we'll get started, even though we still have some registrants signing in. Um, so I am going to go ahead and mute everyone for the presentation. Uh, So, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to be going over launching your career as a clinical research coordinator. My name is Jessica Angelescu, Internship and Partnership Procurement Manager. We will be covering a lot of information today. So, this initial career services webinar is just going to be doing a high level, but I do want to let you all know that in the upcoming months, we'll be doing individual webinars, kind of reviewing over resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn, different types of career development topics. Um, so, as I mentioned, this may be a lot of information today, but we just kind of want to put it out there and then kind of go from there into more detailed webinars moving forward, where there'll be Q&A, things of that nature. Uh, Available for us to go through together. This webinar is being recorded and it will be in the career development part of your Think of Fit course. So the recording will be available. Again, I know it's a lot of information, so um, definitely take notes as you go along. Think of some questions that you'd like to ask in the upcoming webinars, things of that nature. But we're gonna dive right in. All right. So clinical research coordinator or the CRC. So again, we're gonna be reviewing the complete career internship in placement um, today. All right, so let's start by talking about the reality of CRC hiring. So it's not really aspirational, it's operational. So when you're looking at employers, their sites, locations, they're not hiring because they want to develop talent. They're hiring you as a CRC because something is already broken, or breaking. Being able to understand the truth behind kind of why hiring is critical, why it's critical for you to position yourself as a solution to hiring managers, kind of puts you in a disposition to kind of stand out from the rest of the talent. So when we're looking at active hiring triggers, um, active trials are behind on schedule, screen failure rates are high, monitoring visits are stressful, protocol deviations are increasing. So this is kind of what says to the hiring manager or the leader that something's not working. We need to bring in talent. We need to employ someone. We need to bring in more CRCs. to be able to kind of fill those gaps, those challenges. Some of the operational breakdown signals for hiring is data queries are piling up, the PI is overwhelmed, regulatory binders are disorganized, documentation gaps are emerging. So either they're seeing or they're starting to see, again, these kind of triggers that would say, hey, we need to begin hiring. So when a CRC position opens, the site is already exposed to risk. Every decision the hiring manager makes is governed by one question. Will this person reduce operational and compliance risk quickly? So as the candidate, your strategy in regards to your resume, your cover letter, your application must be built around answering that question convincingly. All right, so before we begin, let's talk about what a CRC actually is. So, a clinical research coordinator is the execution authority at a site level operating under delegated responsibility from the PI. It's not an entry level admin position, it's a role that requires a lot of controlled decision making in a regulated environment. So, it requires constant vigilance, impeccable documentation habits, and the ability to make protocol compliant decisions under pressure. And when hiring managers are interviewing, they are looking for this. So when we look at behavioral questions, they're going to ask specific questions related to these types of skills, competencies, looking at the job responsibilities and the job description, and hiring managers must know this. So a lot of time, candidates don't really know, which can create an immediate differentiation and opportunities for those who really do understand what the role is and what the expectations are, what the responsibilities are. So that's definitely something to make you stand out. So when we're looking at the core functions of the CRC, it's someone who executes the protocol precisely, interfaces directly with patients, maintains regulatory compliance, and documents trial conduct completely. When we're looking at critical responsibilities, this individual will coordinate all study visits, support monitoring activities, protect data integrity, and serves as the first line in audit defense. So now that we know the core functions and the critical responsibilities, let's take a look at what ACRC is not. It's not admin support. It's not observational research staff. It's not an entry level in responsibility, and it's not a position that's independent from the PI oversight. So let's take a peek at who actually gets hired as a CRC. So this hiring is not limited to one background. Successful CRCs constantly come from diverse professional experience, each bringing valuable perspectives to site level trial execution. So they're not really looking at your degree, your title. What matters is that you are able to demonstrate those competencies, those skills that we talked about on the previous slide, that make you and enable you to predict success in regulated clinical research environments. So when we're looking at research background, so some examples, research assistants, clinical trial assistants, lab techs, these individuals typically do understand the documentation requirements, the protocols very well. Looking at healthcare professionals, so we've got nurses, medical assistants, allied health professionals. These individuals really have that patient-facing experience, clinical documentation skills as well. Over to life science graduates, biology, chemistry, related degrees that really go along with the CRC training, demonstrate that research readiness. And then any types of regulatory and admin experience. So coordinators, healthcare admins, They have experience in the exposure to compliance, process, discipline, those types of things that are really what hiring managers are looking for. So let's dive into the essential competencies that drive hiring decisions. So what are those competencies, those skills that really make you stand out as a candidate? So the first one we have here is comfort with regulated processes. So you have the ability to demonstrate that you can follow complex multi-steps procedures without deviation. So you stick to the step-by-step, it's black and white, you can do it in your sleep. Documentation discipline. So meticulous attention to detail in recording, filing, and maintaining accurate records. And then patient-facing professionalism. As a CRC, the hiring manager is looking for somebody that has the ability to communicate clearly, build trust, and maintain appropriate clinical boundaries. And again, these will show up in the interview questions that you're asked. Again, most likely going to be behavioral types of interview questions. So understanding when to seek guidance in how to communicate concerns appropriately. So if you don't know the answer to a question, you know how to get the answer. You feel okay. You feel comfortable with asking the questions. And the ability to follow protocols precisely without unauthorized modifications or kind of improving it. Structured CRC training programs such as ACRCC do exist specifically to ensure that students do know the skills and the competencies required before they're placed into those live trials, which can ultimately reduce the risk profile that concerns the hiring managers the most when they're looking at talent. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into the core responsibilities for the CRC. So this is really what the hiring manager is looking for when they're asking you questions so that they know that you understand clearly what the job entails, that you can articulate kind of the full scope of the role, the responsibilities. When you're answering in vague or incomplete responses or short responses, yes, no, about the daily responsibilities, it does signal a lack of preparation and an increased risk for that hiring manager or employer. So you want to be able to have the ability to discuss these functions specifically and with confidence during your interview with the employer, the hiring manager, the recruiter, to ensure that you do have an increased interview success rate. So patient recruitment and pre-screening. So being able to identify potential participants, including inclusion, exclusion criteria, and conducting preliminary eligibility assessments to minimize screen failures and protect patient safety. Next, we have informed consent execution. So conducting consent discussions using IRB approved materials, ensuring comprehension, documentation, the process completely, and maintaining consent documentation per regulatory requirements. Third up is eligibility verification. So confirming all inclusion criteria are met and no exclusive criteria are present with source documentation supporting every eligibility determination before enrollment. Visit scheduling and coordination. So managing those complex visits, schedules, coordinating with multiple departments, ensuring protocol required procedures are completed within the visit windows. Up next is source documentation. So creating accurate, complete source records that will be able to support all protocol required assessments and can withstand audit scrutiny. Adverse event management. So identifying potential AEs, documenting objectivity, notifying the PI appropriately, and supporting the SAE reporting timelines, maintaining comprehensive safety logs. All right, so protocol deviation identification. So being able to recognize deviations as they occur, documenting root causes, notifying appropriate parties, and supporting corrective action implementation. Up next is the EDC data entry, so accurate, timely electronic data capture from source documents to case report forms, maintaining data integrity throughout the transcription process. Query resolution, so being able to respond to data queries promptly and appropriately with the source documentation, understanding root causes, and preventing reoccurring patterns. And then regulatory binder maintenance, organizing and maintaining the site regulatory files, ensuring all documents are current, properly filed, and inspection ready at all times. Monitoring visit preparation, so being able to prep the source documents, resolving any outstanding queries, organizing materials for review, and facilitating effective monitoring visits. And then lastly, inspection readiness. So being able to maintain a continuous audit, being prepared through organized documentation, complete training records, and readily accessible essential documents. So down here, we did note critical interview insight. So candidates who aren't able to explain these functions clearly with appropriate regulatory context are not considered job ready, regardless of academic credentials or related experience. So again, it's very important that you take note of, you prepare responses, you're able to discuss these specifically, because again, it definitely will impact your interview success. All right, so let's talk about patient recruitment and pre-screening. So this is one of the most misunderstood skills as a CRC. So what is the misconception? So when we're looking at this from an employer, hiring manager, recruiter perspective, recruitment is not marketing. It's about, it's not about maximizing enrollment numbers, because recruitment is risk control. So this fundamental misunderstanding causes most early career CRCs to fail more than any other knowledge gap. So high-performing CRCs understand that effective recruitment protects patients from unnecessary procedures, reduces screen failure rates, it makes it efficient as a use of site resources. It maintains protocol integrity. So every pre-screening decision is a quality control checkpoint. So when we're looking at the high quality, the high performing CRC recruitment approach, we want to be able to translate criteria. So converting inclusion and exclusion criteria into clear, actionable decision trees that can be applied consistently during initial patient contact. We want to be able to identify early any disqualifying factors as early as possible in the screening process to prevent unnecessary burden on patient and site resources. We also want to be able to systematically track screen failures by reason, be able to identify patterns that are able to inform the recruitment strategy, adjustments, and protocol feasibility feedback. We also want to prevent patients from undergoing screening procedures when pre-screening information already suggests likely ineligibility. And then we want to be able to adjust the strategies. So continuously looking at refining the approaches based on screen failure data, enrollment velocity, and protocol-specific challenges. So here at the bottom, I did put in some interview language that signals readiness specifically to this approach. So I approach recruitment as a quality control process designed to minimize screen failures and protect patient safety by applying inclusion and exclusion criteria systematically during the initial patient contact. Um, this sentence really helps to differentiate strong candidates against weak ones immediately. It allows you to show the hiring manager, the recruiter, the employer that you have a strong understanding of recruitment as a regulated process rather than just looking at quantity. So high volume driven activity, it allows you to show that you have respect for the patient's safety as well as the awareness of operational efficiency concerns that drive the hiring manager's decisions. All right, so let's talk about informed consent and where the CRC careers are won or lost. So consent errors are one of the most common audit findings and represent one of the highest risk areas as an individual for the CRC responsibility. So a single consent error can invalidate patient enrollment, compromise data integrity, expose the site to regulatory action, and damage the site's relationship with sponsors. And there is a zero tolerance for improvisation in the consent process. So when we're looking at being able to critically understand that consent is a process, not a form. It's a documented decision, a verification of understanding, and a confirmation of voluntary participation, all executed with strict regulatory boundaries. So when we look at those boundaries, when we look at, understanding the informed consent, what we're talking about is the version control, confirming the use of current IRB approved consent version before any patient contact, conducting consent discussion appropriately, covering all required elements without coercion, answering all patient questions accurately within scope without promising outcomes or minimizing the risks, documenting consent discussion completely in the source documents, as well as being able to include those key topics covered. Ensuring all consent personnel are properly delegated and trained before conducting consent discussions, allowing sufficient time for the patient to review materials and formulate questions, executing all required signatures correctly in the proper sequence with appropriate dates and times, and then filing the signed consent in both the patient's chart and regulatory binder immediately. So why does this consent matter to employers? So programs like ACRCC focus on consent workflows thoroughly because employers cannot risk mistakes in this area. The site faces immediate consequences for consent violations, regulatory findings, sponsor notifications, corrective action plans, potential study suspension, and reputational damage that affects future trials. So as a CRC, you want to be able to demonstrate a clear grasp and understanding of the consent requirements through structured training, sustainably lower, being able to ultimately lower the perceived risk for their candidacy. All right, so let's talk about eligibility and source documentation. So this is the foundation of data integrity. So eligibility errors invalidate the data. This is not an overstatement when a patient who does not meet the inclusion criteria or meets exclusion criteria is enrolled into a trial. Every data point collected from a patient becomes questionable. The site faces potential data exclusion, protocol violation reports, and compromised trial integrity. So you want to make sure that you are verifying before enrollment. Never assume eligibility based on an incomplete information. You want to make sure that you're using eligibility checks for every single patient, documenting also how each criteria was verified and where the supporting document exists. Source support required. So ensure source documents explicitly support every eligibility determination. Vague or inferred eligibility is insufficient for audit defense. Document deviations immediately. So if there's an issue that is discovered post-enrollment, you want to document this deviation ASAP and follow any type of site escalation procedure protocol without delay. So if it is not documented, it did not happen. This principle governs every aspect of clinical research conduct. Source documentation must be contemporaneous, created or near the limit time of observation, accurate, complete, and legible. Strong documentation habits offer significant hiring advantages because they directly reduce audit risk and inquiry burden. So documentation created at the time of the activity or observation, not later, and not from memory. Making sure that the information is free of errors, complete in detail, truthful in representation of what actually occurred. The information is complete, contains all protocol required information, as well as sufficient detail to reconstruct the visit or activity, as well as legible. So the information that you're presenting needs to be readable and understandable by anyone reviewing the documentation, and this includes auditors and monitors. All right. Moving on to adverse events and safety. So as a CRC, you definitely want to be able to understand the boundaries of your role in adverse event management. It's definitely a key aspect in your day-to-day role as a CRC. So as a CRC, you guys are not diagnosing, you do not assess casualty independently, you don't make medical decisions, and ultimately overstepping these boundaries creates patient safety risk and liability exposure that sites just kind of have a zero tolerance policy on. So when we're looking at the appropriate CRC adverse event responsibilities, you want to be able to recognize and document any unfavorable medical occurrence in a trial participant, whether or not considered related to the investigational product. This requires clinical awareness without clinical judgment. You want to be sure to record AE information factually and completely, including onset date, duration, severity, outcome, and any actions taken. You want to make sure you're avoiding interpretation or casualty speculation when you're documenting. Be sure to follow site-specific escalation procedures for AE notification, ensuring that your PI is informed according to the protocol requirements and SOPs with particular urgency for serious adverse events. Let's see, facilitating rapid SAE reporting by gathering required information, prepping the documentation, and ensuring sponsor notification deadlines are met. And then ensuring you're tracking all AEs systematically, ensuring complete documentation, appropriate follow-up, and resolution documentation for all safety events. So why are we talking about this? So correct scope boundaries are critical to trust. Hiring managers must be confident that you, as a CRC, understand when to document, when to escalate, and when to defer to medical authority. When you can demonstrate a clear understanding of these boundaries, you're viewed as a lower risk hire. So when we're kind of looking at those risks, you have kind of those red flags that employers try to look for when they're, conducting their assessment. So some red flag responses would be, I would assess whether the AE is related to the studied drug. I would decline if the patient needs medical attention. I would determine the severity level. I would not handle minor AEs independently. So these are things you do not want to say. But instead, let's move over here to the green flag responses of what you should say. I would document objectively and notify the PI per SOP. I would ensure the PI is aware immediately for assessment. I would gather information to support the PI's evaluation, and I would follow the site's escalation pathway consistently. All right, so protocol deviations. So protocol deviations happen at all sites. This is just a reality of clinical research. No site achieves perfect protocol adherence across trials in all patients. But what does separate high-performing sites from struggling sites is not the absence of deviations, but the speed and the quality of response when deviations occur. So when we're looking at deviation management, you want to be sure you're identifying deviations early. You want to document objectively, notify appropriately, support corrective action, and adjust workflows. And when hiring managers are looking at this, they value a CRC who can prevent repeat deviations. So a single deviation is a data point. So repeated deviations of the same type indicate a failure to be able to learn and adapt. So when we're looking at kind of values data, sites report repeat deviations at 73%. So most sites experience the same deviation types across multiple patients due to process gaps. 45% preventable through training. So nearly half of common deviations are preventable through better staff training and checklist implementation. And then 92% of hiring managers prioritize learning. So the overwhelming majority of hiring managers value candidates who demonstrate a structured approach to learning from errors. So when we look at this during interviews, demonstrate your understanding by discussing how you would implement preventative systems. So an example of how you could communicate this is after any deviation, I would document not just what happened, but what process change would prevent recurrence. I would suggest checklist modifications, adjustment workflows, or additional training needs to effectively eliminate repeat events. And this really shows the hiring manager that you can think critically, and that you can go through this deviation management effectively as a CRC. All right, so data entry and query management. So quality matters more than speed. So as a CRC, your data responsibilities extend beyond simple transcription. Effective data management requires understanding the relationship between source documentation and electronic data capture, recognizing query patterns, and continuously improving documentation quality to reduce the query burden. So sites measure CRC performance not by how fast the data is entered, but how clean the data is and how quickly queries are resolved with appropriate source support. So being able to accurately input the EDC entry, so transcribing the source data into the electronic case report, timely query resolution, being able to respond within sponsor-specific timelines, being able to provide clear responses, as well as explanations, root cause analysis, so analyze reoccurring query types to identify gaps, training needs, workflow improvements. So some of the resume language that demonstrates the data competency of the CRC job, kind of the day-to-day. So let's look at the weak language first, and then we'll move over to the strong language. So weak would be entered data into the EDC system, responded to queries, maintained accurate records, worked with sponsors, databases. These statements are very generic and provide no evidence of impact or understanding. So when you're preparing and you're thinking about, looking at the job responsibilities, the skills, the competencies in the job description, you really want to make yours stand out. So here's some strong language to do that. So reduced reoccurring data queries by 40% through improved source documentation consistency. Maintained less than 5-day average query resolution across 3 concurrent protocols. Implemented source document templates that eliminated 60% of eligibility-related queries. So these statements do demonstrate that you have the operational impact as well as the systematic improvement. So you really want to be able to show that you know and understand the data responsibilities. So anytime that you can add data into your resume, whether it's date, percentages, totals, make sure that you can do that. ChatGPT is great for helping and assisting you in creating your resume with kind of these data points. So definitely think about that. So when we're looking at best practices for query resolution, day one, review new queries immediately upon receiving those, prioritized by urgency and complexity. Day two, you want to gather source documentation, prepare responses for straightforward queries. Day three, submit responses for simple queries, escalate complex queries to your PI if medical judgment is required. Day four, follow up on escalated queries with PI input, finalize complex query responses. And then day five, submit all query responses, document any remaining queries with reasons for delays. All right, so regulatory binder and inspection readiness. So CRCs are the first line in inspection defense. So when an FDA inspector, sponsor auditors, or IRB reviewers arrive at the site, they organize, and the organization and completeness of the regulatory binders creates an immediate impression that influences the entire inspection experience. So disorganized binders signal broader compliance concerns and can and will trigger more intensive scrutiny. So we kind of put a chart here for your review, but let's, due to time, let's kind of move over to the binder responsibilities. So delegation, log maintenance, approval management, version control, training and documentation, binder completeness verification, and filing organization. So inspection readiness is not continuous, it is continuous, not evidence-based. So Many CRC candidates mistakenly believe that regulatory binder work intensifies before inspections. High-performing CRCs maintain inspection-ready binders at all times because inspections can occur with minimal notice, and continuous readiness reduces the stress and error risk. So when we're looking at it from an interview perspective, how do you maintain regulatory binders? A weak response would be I would keep all documents organized and filed properly so they are ready when needed. But if you want to really stand out, the strongest response would be I would maintain a checklist of essential documents for each trial, conduct weekly binder reviews to identify missing or outdated documents, file new documents within 24 hours of receipt, and maintain a tracking log of document versions to ensure version control. I would treat every day as a pre-inspection. All right, so monitoring visits and how CRCs earn CRA trust. So monitoring visits are important interactions that greatly affect site reputation, sponsor relationship, and future trial opportunities. CRAs, or clinical research associates who monitor sites, develop strong opinions about which CRCs are prepared, responsible, and reliable. So, as a CRC, you can succeed at monitoring by ensuring that you're preparing thoroughly, resolving any open inquiries, organizing source documents, tracking your action items, and communicate transparently. So CRAs remember CRCs who make visits efficient. They remember where site documentation is organized, queries are resolved, and conversations are productive. This positive reputation influences which sites receive new trial opportunities and which CRCs are recommended for advancement. So when we're looking at the CRC career progression, when you start out as a CRC, it's not a terminal position. It's an entry point into a range of clinical research career paths. So being able to really understand these progression opportunities helps you make strategic decisions about skill development, networking, career planning from the beginning of your CRC career. So when we're looking at the progression, you have the clinical research coordinator, the CRC, moving up to the senior CRC, the lead CRC, and then site manager, clinical research manager, and then ultimately a site director or a clinical operations director. So when we're looking at how to advance from the clinical research coordinator to each step here, all the way up to the site director, some of the building blocks are your technical skills and your relationship to buildings. So when we're looking at the technical side, becoming proficient in the EDC systems, develop therapeutic area expertise, obtaining additional certifications. Some individuals call it upskilling or stacking credentials. Learn regulatory requirements thoroughly, improve process efficiency skills. When we're looking at relationship building, you want to build strong CRA relationships. You want to network with sponsor organizations, present at site meetings, mentor new coordinators, and participate in professional associations. All right, so let's take a peek at the compensation for a CRC. So it does vary significantly based on geographic location, therapeutic area, site type, experience level, and individual performance. So you really do need to have an understanding of the typical compensation ranges because this will help you evaluate the job offers realistically and negotiate appropriately. So do note that these figures represent typical US market ranges and may vary considerably in your specific market. So we're looking at an entry-level CRC, it's about 52,500. An experienced CRC is about 72,500. And then a lead or a senior CRC is 92,500. So again, you want to make sure that you're looking at your geographic location, your site type, your therapeutic area, and your certifications and education. But I do want to make a note that, when you're looking at your compensation and kind of that strategy, that approach that you want to take, compensation can and does rise with responsibility and trust. So your first CRC position should be evaluated not only on salary, but training, quality, mentorship availability, therapeutic area exposure, and career advancement and potential. All right. So when we're looking at the CRC resume template, and again, everyone will be kind of diving more into these over the next few months, but this is just kind of a high level. One of the critical resume principles is every bullet point should demonstrate process discipline, regulatory awareness, and systematic approach. You want to avoid generic statements that you could just apply in bulk, right? You really want to look at the job description, look at those keywords, look at transferable skills, looking at, the job responsibilities. So at the top, you're going to have your professional summary, you're going to have your core competencies, noting these skills that you have learned through your training. Any type of CRC training and projects, you can go very detailed here if you're just starting out, education, and then additional skills or technology is very important to point out here. So when you're doing your cover letter, again, you want to ensure that you stand out. So when you create this, you want to be very concise, specific, and focused on operational readiness rather than enthusiasm or just having a generic interest template or a general interest in just helping people. So the most effective cover letters demonstrate understanding of site level realities, acknowledge the structured training completed, and express appropriate professional maturity. So I know we've come a long way in developing cover letters, and it used to be you would put your name and your address and your phone number and your email, but you don't need to do that anymore. It's kind of eased up in regards to, dear hiring manager, this is who I am, this is my experience, this is how I can solve your problem. Thank you for your time, and then sincerely your name, phone, and email. So when we're looking at a strategy, you want to customize the third paragraph by researching the organization's therapeutic focus, trial portfolio, or research reputation. Specific knowledge signals genuine interest and reduces perceived applicant volume. So you really want to put yourself out there, show you're interested, why you're interested, what problem you can essentially solve for the employer. All right, so LinkedIn profile template. Again, we're going to go through this quickly, but you want to make sure that your headline matches. So clinical research coordinator, you can do CRC as an acronym as well, looking at, the kind of areas that you've trained in, your about section, so who you are, what are your competencies, your training background, your professional approach, your interests, your skills, and then a featured section of, ensuring that you have your certification, any other courses or training or stacking credentials that you have. You really want your LinkedIn profile to mirror your resume. So just keep that in mind. But again, we'll go deeper dive into LinkedIn. All right. So when we're looking at outreach, you really want to focus on the two questions approach. So research shows that messaging requesting guidance receives 3 to 4 times more responses than messages about jobs. So hiring managers, research leaders are willing to offer advice when they're not actively hiring. So these conversations can definitely lead to referrals, internship opportunities, or a simple outreach saying, hey, we've got position available. So, when you're reaching out, you want to make sure that it's short, sweet, concise, to the point. 300 characters maximum for a LinkedIn outreach message. So why does this work? So it presents you appropriately. It is an ask for guidance, it signals preparation, and it respects their time. Follow-up strategy for this outreach is send initial message on day 1, politely follow up after day 5, and final attempt to follow up after day 10. So when we're looking at a 30, 60, 90-day CRC plan, when we're looking at days 1 through 30, the primary goal is to learn site-specific systems, protocols, workflows without independent patient responsibility. So when you're joining an organization, this is what day 1 through 30 looks like. Days 31 through 60 is supervised independence, and then days 61 through 90 is independent contribution. You really want to be able to kind of take your 30, 60, 90-day framework, adapt it to the plan based on specific site, therapeutic area, trial portfolio. And during interviews, mention willingness to adjust timelines based on site leadership guidance. This shows that you're flexible and adaptable, as well as the plan demonstrates structure, not rigid flexibility. I know we're going through these kind of quickly, but I do want to remind you that the recording will be available. And again, we'll be having additional webinars throughout the year to go over these more in depth. So when we're looking at strategy overview by category, strategies 1 through 10, direct application improvement. So applying within 45 or 48 hours of a job posting, tailoring your resume, using those keywords, competencies, trainings, experience, transferable skills. Strategies 11 through 20 is direct outreach. So like we went through the LinkedIn outreach, you can, research companies that you want to work for. You can find recruiters, hiring managers, create a list of individuals that you want to reach out to. And then looking at kind of refining your LinkedIn and your networking. Again, keywords. You want to reach out, create connections with research professionals, comment on research posts, join clinical research groups, and send out messages to those individuals. And then strategies for 31 through 40, interview and conversions. So bring the 30, 60, 90-day plan to interviews, prepare STAR method examples for common questions. And again, we'll go over the STAR method example. But essentially it's situation, task, action, and result. So what was the problem? How did you solve it? What was the time? What were your actions? What were the results? All right, so we'll go over this slide quickly, and then we will have to unfortunately end. But again, we'll have multiple webinars going over a lot of different information throughout the next few months, being very detailed. This recording will be available in the in your Thinkific course. So as a wrap up, sites need clinical research coordinators that are trusted with patient safety, regulatory compliance, and data integrity. These are not abstract concepts. They are daily operational realities that determine whether trials succeed or fail and whether sites maintain sponsor relationships, as well as whether patients are protected appropriately. Sites do not hire CRCs to give people opportunities or develop talent. Sites hire you because they have trials running, patients enrolled, data collection deadlines, monitoring visits scheduled, and regulatory obligations that must uh, be met with precision. Every hiring decision is a risk calculation. So keep that in mind as you're creating your profile and your resume and your cover letter. Um, the hiring managers are looking for that discipline, respect for regulation, organization, and clear communication. Um, Structured training programs such as ACRCC exist because these competencies must be present before placement. Sites cannot afford to teach basic protocol execution, consent principles, or documentation requirements while the trials are actively enrolling. Um, Being in the training program reduces the learning curve, minimizes early career errors, and creates candidates who understand operational reality before the first day. So, um, like I said, so much more to come. I know this was a lot of information. I really, really appreciate everyone joining today. The recording will be up in the Think of It course. We will be going more in discussion on various aspects of, your job search. So goal setting and LinkedIn and resumes and cover letters and everything. So I'm really excited for what this year has to offer for us. I appreciate your patience as we got through this today. But thank you all and have a wonderful week.